Okay. So I'm gonna let people filter in. Um, so it says about 2 watching. All right. I hope more than 2 people are going to be signing on to this. All right, I'll give it 1 more minute, and then whoever's here, I will lecture to you, and then you will have this information, and your classmates will not. Haha. All right. All right, cool. So, all right, 3 people. I'm going to lecture my butt off for you, so that you get the most out of this, and the people that didn't think it was worth their time to show up can just miss it. So, welcome to our final lecture of the semester. So today, what we're going to talk about is, so the slide here says visibility, festivals, promo items, and online markets, but really this is a lecture that I like to call You Made a Game, Now What? And what is this going to cover? Well, it's going to cover a few things, pretty important for making games as a career. Now, a lot of people, one of the weaknesses of game development school, is that game development school spends a lot of time teaching you all the things about, making games, how to use the engines, how to structure levels, and how to build characters, do all this other stuff. But sometimes game schools find themselves just lacking in time to tell you what happens to games once they're created, or they leave it on the students, and that's not something I like to do. Maybe sometimes, like, maybe some faculty don't know what it means. Maybe that's why they feel like they can be hyper focused on the tools because they've never done this other part. But I'm here to tell you that, and you've heard this before, but this is the lecture where we really, 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 really talk about it. I'm here to tell you that, actually assembling a game is not even half of what you do. It's a big part certainly, but sometimes like there's stuff that both comes before and after the actual making of a game that is none of the skills you've learned, but sometimes it's even more important. One case could be you have to do a bunch of pitches and you have to do a bunch of fundraising and a bunch of other stuff to even get money to make your game. And I realize that you're thinking, money? What do I use money to make a game? What can I do with money to make a game? Because you might be so used to like, oh, let's just get together and make a game. But think about, the people that make a career out of, if you're doing art now, you could like, charge for it and things like that. So assembling a bunch of people that charge for their services, suddenly games become very expensive to produce, and that's when you get into professional production, and that's why you fundraise. Likewise, once you build a game, what do you do with it? You want people to see it, or you want them to buy it. How do you pull this off? Money can be exchanged for goods and services. Exactly. So, yeah, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, and this is a lecture that I want your questions. I want and please, when I say I want your questions, nobody ask me something that can be answered in the syllabus. When your final is in the syllabus, and it's on the registrar's site. We're here to talk about the real meat of being a professional today. And again, coming from somebody who has been around the block more than a few times at this point, so we're going to talk about what do you do with your game once you've made them? Where should you send your game? Like, what are festivals and how can you use them? Game booths. What is a game booth? How do you have one? How do you run one? Merchandising. So like, what else can you have accompanying your game that helps people remember it or helps people, promo it for you, things like that. Where do you put your game up? Like, so online marketplaces, stuff like that. And a bit of social media or how to build an audience without, feeding the trolls. So first let's start with, I made a game. Now what? Okay, so a few weeks ago, hey, 4 people, all right. I was filling out ranking surveys a few months ago, and they had a really interesting question, which was, in your program, do you make your students make a fully functional game that is put up on a website? And I thought that was a really interesting question. It made me think to schools I had been to before that did not have their students make, like, maybe if they made a game, they might, like, finally make one in senior year. And then, like, they might do something with it. But, in this class alone, you have made 3 games. Think about that. Like, that's 3 games. Like, they're not big games, but they don't have to be big games. They just have to be. Like, I just went on a run, and it's the day after, or it's 2 days after, like, I got my second COVID vaccine. So, like, I feel much better, but I'm a little sluggish working out. And I got back, and I told my wife, that wasn't a good run, but it was a run, your games aren't big games, but they're games. And truth be told, like there's a lot of really great little games out there. Don't discount little games. And then in our program alone, like if you take this class, I counted it up. If you take this class, which you are obviously, you make 6 games in the game design concentration in our program. That is a lot of games. That is a lot of games in a college career. So, and assuming like you make a game for your capstone if you're in the game design concentration, right? So, so basically all this is to say, like, you are in a position where you have games that you have made. Congratulations. Yay, give yourself a little round of applause, pat on the back. That's really good. That's really good that you have games. Now what do you do with that game? So you have a few options. You can pop it online and make it publicly available and people can download it. And technically that's a requirement for your itch.io. I don't require it to be public, but most of you have made it public. And awesome. Now, think about this. Like, when you make your game public, have any of you checked your analytics? If you go to your game's page, there's a thing at the top in the left that says, or like left, center, it says analytics. It'll let you actually look at how many people have downloaded your game. Think about that. So, like, if you go on there and you see that, like, 100 people downloaded your game, that's 100 people that have downloaded your game, right? Who have you been used to showing your games to in your life otherwise? Your teachers, your classmates. That's not 100 people. Like, let's say it was 500 people or 1,000 people. Like, that's it's a lot of people compared to your usual like circle of influence. So putting something up for download can be really great. It can be a really good thing to do, so that people can just see and enjoy your work. But maybe you have a lot of faith in some of your work, and if you do, maybe you decide to send it to a festival. Now that could be really cool. Not only can that get you publicity, but it also maybe allows you to, get some industry positivity and feedback and credit for your game. Meaning, like, let's say you got into you submitted it to the Akron Art Museum arcade, Game Fest Akron, that's coming up. The entry is open until June, so you should all enter your games. So let's say you enter those games and you get in. You get to you could like put one of those laurel wreath graphics you see on films that made it into a film festival or games that made it into a game festival, or Indiecade or IGF or Boston Festival of Indie Games, or any of the BitBash. Any of these. Yours says 0. That's okay. Sometimes we all get those. So like, when you send things to festivals, that's more eyes. But sometimes that also comes with like the potential to have, somebody like give you an award. That could be great. Maybe you finish it. Some of what we do in classes like this are, they're 3 or 4 month projects. They're, or in this case, like a month or 2 at most. Even like a month at most in this class. So that's not very long. You might make a few levels. You could decide to finish it. You can decide to like make the whole thing. And that might give you, maybe then you release it as something. If you kind of say like, hey, I think this has legs, let me turn it into a full experience. Maybe after you finish it, you sell it for money. You could make money on it. It's yours. Go for it. But what if you want to do none of that? What if you're like, this isn't the kind of thing I want to do, or, I want to move on to a different type of game development. Here's the deal. Why do we have you make these games even if it's not 100% the type of development you want to do? No exercise at this level is without merit. And any game you make is experience. I always use the analogy of like, Japanese role-playing games where, the first part of the role-playing game, you're going to fight like level 1 slimes. And, fighting all those level 1 slimes is going to help you level up to eventually you're going to go beat the Dark Lord. But you can't go beat the Dark Lord right away. You've got to like hit a bunch of level 1 slimes first. And build yourself up, right? So all of these, this is all to say, all of these games, no matter how small they are, have merit. They are not wasted effort. They are part of your story as a maker. And this is you getting experience. Now, it's short-sighted. It's incredible. If you're thinking, well, but, it's not 3D. I want to make 3D games, So, like, unless it's Unreal, it doesn't, like, matter. No, wrong. And why is that wrong? Well, because anybody can learn a tool. You've heard me say it before. If you think that all you're here to do is learn some tools, well, here's the secret. You're wasting your money because YouTube is free. And, like, yes, I realize you have to pay for the internet to get to YouTube, but, like, you can go to the library. Right? What you are here to learn is you're here to learn from people who've been around the block a few times. You're here to ask people like that questions and learn from their knowledge and experience. And you're here to get experiences of your own that don't come from following tutorials on YouTube. That's the value of an education. And what you are doing besides just doing stuff again, you've heard me say this, the tools don't matter. That's why we're like doing, a tool, a project. What matters is that you worked on a team, you came up with ideas, you executed on those ideas, and you launched something, and you presented it, and you released it. That's the experience that matters. Because if you can do that for a text game, a retro game, a bigger retro game, you can do that eventually for a 2D platformer with an interesting art style, an avant-garde top-down art game, a 3D game, etc. Like your AAA game, you'll be able to be on like a AAA game, team. So, all this is to say, like the last part here, even if you don't want to keep working on any of these particular games, sit down by yourself or with your team and just like reflect on the experience. Say what went right, say what went wrong. I had somebody ask me like, "Oh, is there a format for postmortem?" No, this isn't an English 101 assignment. Just sit down with your team and say, "Hey, where do you think we could have been better?" And then the next time you make a game, you'll know that having no documentation is a bad idea. Or, I guess if we would have used, not used Google Drive for our project management and we used like version control instead, we would have had an easier time or something like that. You can, you want to reflect on these things, and that's really important, because that'll help you grow as a designer. So that's what I mean when I say like postmortem. So and from the students, because I'm seeing that maybe there's a few people, hi people, that are also here because they follow me on YouTube. But from the students in my class, ask me 2 questions before we can move on. Don't worry, we are going to move faster after this. I wanted to like lay the groundwork here. Here's a great question. Are there any metrics to getting your game into festivals, or is it just luck? Well, it's never luck. If it were pure luck, then quality wouldn't matter. I will actually go over that in a second. Thank you for asking that. We will go over some of that in a second on how to strategically enter festivals. How long do you usually spend after a game's done on reflecting or spreading it around before deciding to start a new project? You can theoretically spread it around as long as you have copies of it available. Like, for example, my tabletop game La Mancha, it had the successful Kickstarter. It sold after release decently well, but it sells pretty well around the holidays pretty consistently. I do occasional pushes for World Book Day. I'm probably going to take out some Facebook ads over the summer. So in that way, it's like a 2-year-old game at this point, but I can sell it. I've got copies around. That being said, I've started several projects since then. So there's nothing to say that you can't do both. Push a game when you see an opportunity to, and then I still find reasons to tell people about a game from 6 years ago. So you never really stop selling or promoting your game that you could theoretically make money on. Reflecting that it's not that you need to go on a mountain and spend years thinking meditating on it. Reflecting could be as much as let's all pop on Discord and have a half-hour session of what went right, what went wrong. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to go climb a mountain. What shouldn't we do after we are ready to publish or sell a game? Be careful with what you promise. Don't be massively racist, sexist, homophobic, generally intolerant, or become a be a scumbag, because then, your game, people won't want to buy your game. That goes without saying, but, in a much more, in a much less blunt way, something that has more nuance, I think, is be careful what you promise, because one thing that's going to happen is gamers are used to they are used to how do I say this? There's 2 phases of game development that gamers are hyper aware of. There's one where it's the sort of wouldn't it be cool phase where you're kind of having ideas, and then there's the buying phase. And the tough part is when you have to you as the developer have to bridge all of those. So for example, one thing that we've dealt with a lot with our Kickstarter, for example, for Little Nemo, is we are right now we are at the stage where we are we have made our prototype. We were able to make a trailer out of that prototype. Now we are taking that prototype apart and putting it completely back together to make our actual production, to enter like full production of the game. And we're going to start with like a vertical slice and then moving on from that. And one thing that has been really interesting is that we've had to fend off a lot of questions about, will you sell on this platform? Will you sell on that platform? What's the timeline for porting to this? Will you have DRM or not? things like, will you sell on these platforms because those platforms don't have DRM? It's one of those things that if I were to say, yes, it's going to be on itch or something like that, I can't say that right now, because a publisher, if we start working with a publisher, they might be like, well, we don't like to do it on itch because we want to be able to control, we want, we don't publish games to itch or something like that. So when, what shouldn't you do? You shouldn't promise anything. Like, don't promise anything until it is locked, until it is like the ink is dry. For example, Mega Ran is going to be on our soundtrack for Nemo, right? That discussion started weeks before we announced it. And I'm not about to say, like, until everything is paid and signed for, yes, we have Mega Ran, because you can't. That could fall through. And then what are you left with? So, and it's the same thing that happened with, No Man's Sky. They were talking about stuff that they were, like, testing out, and then when it came to the game being released, they weren't ready with those features, and then everybody was like, well, they lied to us. No, they didn't lie to you. They maybe said some things in the press they shouldn't have, but they didn't lie to you. We talked about this before in a previous class where we said, like, so I guess, if a student says you're going to have a feature and then you had to cut it a week before the project was due, you lied to the teacher. No, production happened. So be careful what you tell your audience you're going to have or not. So that's a big thing you want to be careful of. Because, like, there's stuff that we've talked about that I would love to talk about, that I would love to tell our fans. But I can't yet, and, I just can't. So, but I'm looking forward to the time when I would be able to. So yeah, no, that's a great question, because it does get into the, like, really don't put yourself in a trap, because if you promise something and then you're not able to deliver on it, then bad things happen. Okay, so festivals. Here's the person who asked about festivals. Here's the festival question. So what are festivals? First of all, limited time events for showcasing the work of small and independent game developers. Now, here's another thing we get a lot as faculty in a program. And you're going to notice that I talk about being indie a lot. One, that's my experience. So that's where a lot of my references come from. But two, think of it this way. And I'll tell you the story really briefly of a graduate of ours that... not from this program, from one that I taught at years ago. He said, I remember, like, the week before he was graduating, he had to turn some paperwork in at our front office, and he was sitting there talking to the person who works at the front office, and I came by, and he goes, I really screwed something up while I was here. I never thought of my classmates as my creative community, because it's not really sinking in. Like, he was basically, what it was that he was so focused on learning the tools and job applications. And this is like somebody who has since gone on to work at a studio that is his own studio that he partially owns and has been very, doing very well, right? But he said, he wished he would have really thought about his classmates as his creative community so that they could, like, make stuff while they were in school. And this is something I tell students a lot, is like, look around you. There's all these people around you that are interested in game making. You could work together and make something outside of your classwork. Like, that's, you have the freedom and the time to do it while you're young people in college. That it's after college that you lose that. But then we hear this. We hear, well, like, I don't want to be indie. It's not up to my standards. it's AAA or bust for me. It's nice for you little people, but I'm big. I shoot big. You ain't AAA until you're hired AAA. You are not at that level. That is not your standard. Get that out of your mind. Here's another story. I was sitting in the CA lounge at GDC one year. CA lounge being the conference associates. They're the people who, help out with the conference, and then in exchange they get a pass, and they help guide people around GDC. So I'm sitting there with some people, and somebody asked me my opinion of their artwork. And it was amazing. It was amazing artwork. And they were asking me about stuff with 3D and all this other stuff, and they were like, oh, should I practice this or that? And I looked at them, and I eventually said, because their stuff was AAA ready, and I said, well, take this with a grain of salt, because I've never worked AAA. And then the guy says, well, yeah, sure, but you have a job. And it kind of struck me when that happened, when there are some people that spend their whole careers chasing AAA. I'm not saying you can, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you should be open to whatever is in front of you. I know people who did AAA, worked Bungie and all these other amazing places, whose first game jobs were kind of little educational games, like web games. Is that what everybody puts down as their dream? No. Probably not. Did it give that person a list of past works on their resumes that somebody would be like, yeah, you've shipped a game before? Yes. And really, when I started out, I wanted to be AAA. And then I got a job. I got jobs teaching 3D, and I got jobs doing educational and other types of, quote unquote, serious games development. And about the time that I did start to get invitations to apply, or people coming up to me and being like, hey, are you happy with your job right now? Because we've got a position at such and such, I think you'd be perfect for. And then I'd be like, yeah, I am actually happy where I am. And then they'd be like, oh, what changed? Well, I got married and had 3 kids. Sometimes your life changes and your priorities change, where it's once upon a time, yeah, I could do whatever. Now, do I want to be crunching in the studio, putting in working 7 days a week, 18, 20-hour days? No. I can't do that. So your life changes. Always, do what's in front of you, do what fits your lifestyle. So that's where, it's important to think about these festivals and things like that, because you're indie until you're AAA, and then sometimes maybe you just stay indie forever because you get your situation together that way, So festivals are important. They're also important to you because you're students, and they have student tracks to help you get exposure. So if you enter the student track and your game gets accepted, now you have another line of your resume, my game, such and such, was displayed at this festival. That's huge. Things that are required for entry. Sometimes money. In fact, I would say that anymore, the minority ask for money. It's more often that you see free, but depending on what you're going for, IGF, Indiecade, those are money. Those require Boston Fig. Those require money. Other ones are free. Just look in what the requirements are on the entry page. You always have to have screenshots. You always have to have some kind of trailer or gameplay video. You always have to have a written description of your game, and you always have to have a game demo. Basically all the stuff, if like you can fill out an itch page, you can enter a festival. What? It's like I planned it out that way. And you know, here was the are there any metrics to getting into a festival? Like, cool your jets. Don't enter every single festival. Now, one thing that was brought up was like, oh, is it just pure luck? Well, it's never just pure luck, because if it were, like I said, if it were pure luck, then quality wouldn't matter either. But you can and should strategically enter festivals. And what do I mean by that? Well, look at the festivals, look at the games they take, and think if it's right for you. Now, what do I mean by that? So, one thing to ask is like, you know, does the festival even take games of the type you are making? Now, if you're making just like a traditional video game of some kind, and I include like 2D, 3D, pixel art, polygons, you know, et cetera, is like, that's just one big lump, like quote unquote digital games. Most will take digital games of any kind, right? But, you know, what if you made a tabletop game? What if you made a game with a custom controller that you, like, you know, used an Arduino for or something like that, or a Makey. What if you, because like I've seen games that are made out of like, that have used like older, you know, repurposed like balance boards or Guitar Hero controllers, or I've seen a game that's a couch like before, like alt controlled GDC. You know, not all festivals take that. Or is your game in VR? Not all festivals take VR for like various logistics reasons, and nowadays health reasons. So like, first of all, is the medium of your game like compatible with what's at the, you know, I can't enter my tabletop game in Games for Change because they don't take tabletop games. You know, that's just what happens. Another thing to ask is your game at the level of polish that entries to a festival are at? Some festivals are ones where, like, they're pretty open to games that are kind of early along, but show some promise. And, you know, that's a good place to, you know, if a festival seems to fit that bill, that's a good place to like go and prototype your game, like go get some play testers and then like take lots of notes and then, you know, do some bug fixes afterward, and like that'll give you just a ton of play testing data. Like, you know, Indicate IGF? No. They want it's going to release this year new hot stuff that is like, you know, they can give you all sorts of like award, you know, that's for like, it's basically out kind of games. You know, and I hate to say it, well, some festivals get a lot of flack for this. You know, you want to know if like a festival is known for looking at all the entries that they get, or if they just say like, oh man, 600 people entered, we can't go through all that, we don't have enough judges. Oh look, it's so-and-so that I know. Okay, give them an award. Some of these festivals are like that. You know, and I'm not going to name names, but alternatively, you know, if any of them have like really annoying practices, I'm not going to call them sketchy. Maybe we'll call them like tone deaf, where there is a festival that is known for, it was started in LA, and I think it thinks everybody lives in LA because they'll announce who's actually been accepted to the festival 2 weeks before the festival. And if you're not near LA, people have ducked out of it because they're like, I'm in Australia and I can't make travel arrangements to LA in 2 weeks. So like, maybe then it's not worth entering that festival. So sometimes there's like logistics issues. Another one thing to think about is like, do you want feedback for your game? Smaller venues are going to give you feedback. Larger venues are just going to be like, nah. So think about that, like Boston Fig gives feedback. The ones that I run give feedback. Usually like local festivals will give feedback. It's those like big worldwide ones that are like heavily established that will not give feedback, and that's just because they have too many entries. It's hard to give feedback, but it's something that, I kind of put my foot down about in mine, but I understand why others don't. But I'm saying that, if that's something you want when you enter, think about when you're entering, your first round of festivals, think about that. And then the other thing to think about is what kind of crowd do they attract? And this is really important because you want to think about what your goal is. Do you want to get feedback? If so, you want to get feedback from your audience. You want to go to where your audience is. And that's, you don't want to just go to like anywhere where there's people. I had a game once that was like a fairly gamer-ish game. Like it had just some kind of like chewy resource management mechanics, and we took it to a show that was like an attachment to a public arts festival. It was called Artscape, down in Baltimore, and great event, great festival. I miss it dearly, but it was always on the hottest weekend in July. I don't know how it, God or whatever, deity you believe or don't believe in is like, when's Artscape? Okay, that one, crank it. All right, cool. Like the powers that be over the weather were like, when's Artscape? Okay, that's the 100-degree day. So what would always happen is everybody off the street would come in to the game part of Artscape where there was air conditioning because we were in an actual building. And people would just be like, here's my kid, show me your video game. And it was always really tough for our game because we're like, oh my gosh, this game is, people don't get it. We're so far away from release. People don't get it, or what's wrong with our design? Well, then we took it to MagFest, which is like all, gamers and, more hobbyist gamers, and they got it. They were like, this game is great. And the user interface is so easy to use. Well, it's all the improvements that we made for the casual folks, for the non-gamer folks, the more general audience. So it helped in that way, but it wasn't until we were like, oh yeah, of course, because we have a game for gamers, duh. And if that sounds like really basic, I'm also traditionally not by training a marketer. I am now, but back then I wasn't. So, that's something to think about. Like, is the time you spend at a festival going to be worthwhile because of who the audience is? If it's a group of people who are going to be coming to see your game. On the flip side, like, if it's only for developers, like, are you really reaching an audience at all, or is it really just because you are trying to get like an industry peer acknowledgement? If you got your game into IGF, that's not your audience. Well, it's your audience in the way that like other developers might buy your work, but it's not going to be open to the general public. You will still be able to be like, I won this IGF award, and then you'll probably get, that'll help you. There's no bad side to that. But when they put it out, it's going to be only other developers because it's a GDC. So you want to think about like who is going to be seeing it when you pick a festival. Now, again, this is not to say that you should not pay attention to those alternate things. They can be super helpful. And again, when you are new, when you are young, when your game is early on, this is where you want to go to show them. because you want to get them in front of people. You want to get feedback. Go to the local game dev meetup. If the local game dev meetup has a showcase, do it. Enter it, do it, get that feedback, get it in front of people. That could be the first rung on your festival circuit ladder. Sometimes there are art festivals that include quote unquote new media. That will often include games. Go to those art festivals. I know I just said, here's why Artscape didn't work for us. It might work for you. Got a mobile game? Probably will work. And that's not to say that mobile games can't be a certain level of specialist or hobbyist. There are a lot of specialist hobbyists. I mean, I'm playing a Dragon Quest on mobile, or I have several Dragon Quest games on mobile. But you know what I mean? Those have a very you can approach it in a very different way than, here is my, RTS, right? Museum events. There are increasingly more museum events that show games. Those are great venues. Sometimes those are really great venues for games that don't fit in any of these other places. So if you make a weird avant-garde art game, see what museum festivals are out there. I was once thanked by a developer for giving their game a home after they got rejected by a bunch of other festivals that were more commercial. And I was like, oh, thank you. But museum events are great at that. And then likewise, so really all this is about is don't just think that if you can't get into the traditional venues, you're sunk. Try other venues. Try avenues that are adjacent to the games space. So tech events can be helpful. Anime conventions like Otakon, OhioCon, those have gaming showcases. Sometimes libraries will do STEM events, science, technology, engineering, math. That, and museums. That's a place to show off a game because guess what you do? And I know that I say that it's not about the technology, it's not about the tool, but we can play ball in that arena when it's helpful to us. You know what I mean? So, that's something that you can use to your benefit. Esports, sometimes you can show off a game at an esports competition. It'll give people something else to do between competing, or it'll give people, they can watch a match and then whatever they're doing in the middle, they can be like, oh, look, a new game. So these events can be really helpful. Before I get into this, ask me one question, students, about this material. We did get a comment. Some schools also cultivate a toxic competitive environment among students, but what they fail to understand is that your classmates will also be your future colleagues, contacts, leads, and directors. Yeah, I don't personally like to make people be like, these are the people you're going to be competing against for jobs. Yeah, I don't like that. I'd much rather have people see each other as, you're, like you said, networking contacts. I think that's more helpful, but it's also just more of what the industry is really like. If you go to any of these conferences, people aren't I mean, like, yeah, people are toxic to each other. Like, that'd be some kind of awful lie to say that there's no, there is absolutely toxicity in the game industry. Such toxicity. But, like, for the most part, people are, when you meet and greet with people, they are, I don't know. Most people are going to be trying to bump each other up. Like, yes, you hear about companies doing awful, like some companies and some people and some, et cetera, being terrible. And I hope that does not happen to, people in my classes. But, like, it really is more realistic when you are at this scale that people are really just trying to, like, celebrate each other and be positive. Most of the jobs I got in the industry, I had a classmate contact helping. Let's all grow together. Yeah, exactly. When you are first starting out, how long did it take to start making money from game making? Let's see. My first... So I admittedly have a weird job path because I did not go to school for game development. I went to school for architecture. And I got... after undergrad, I got a job being like a digital media intern consultant at an architecture firm. And then when I got out of grad school, I was a digital media consultant for an architecture firm that underpaid for that and never. If I could go back and talk to my just out of grad school self, I would teach that young man to write a scary contract for that architecture firm. But yeah, my job out of grad school, I mean, I made money, but it was not enough money to really. It was a lot. It was a tight amount of money for the Washington D.C. metro area. Let's put it that way. When I started game making, my first job, quote unquote, in the industry or industry adjacent, was teaching 3D art at a school that was known for having an ad that featured the line "Tighten up the graphics." But it did give me that stepping stone to, and the time to do game making. I got a contract with a game development company. So my day job, quote unquote, was a games job, but my game making, like, we made a game and I started receiving money from that, probably was about 3 years after I like really was focused on game making. And that was because we had, let's see, 2011, 2012. No, it was about 2012 was when I got the contract to do the mobile games with that company. And then we did, like, throughout 2012, we developed 2 games into 2013. 2013 was when I finally got, like, and here is your cut of that game. So, yeah, it was a few years, but I did have a day job, quote unquote, in games or game adjacent. So I guess it depends on, like, which you want to. I was using my game development skills in that context, but the actual game money. So I guess if you, like, it depends on which you want to count as, like, this is when it was. But I started one of the things that I always do tell people, though, and this is why I'm like, oh shoot, when was it? Get a job using the skills you have, like, get a job out of school, but, like, you have all these skills. You're going to get a better paying job if you use the skills you have over, like, going and like, yeah, we all have that, like, just out of college retail job, right? Like, I worked at a pet store for a little while, before I got one of these digital consulting jobs, but like, work on those jobs and work on it, like try to get one based on your skill rather than, what's on the degree. So like it doesn't have to be game or animation. It could be like, you do architectural visualization for a firm, or you do graphic design, or, something that uses those skills, but at least it is you using those skills. And then again, if you do some work, you can make something and then break into that game job. I had a friend who did, he worked at like a security, like QA and eventually production at a like security software company in South Dakota for years. And now he works at Epic. And like, he got that Epic job through people, as somebody in the chat said, through people like contacts, like people he knows, classmates, et cetera, helping them make those connections. And then he, eventually got like a one that is like, oh, you are at the company that makes Fortnite and the Unreal Engine. So, careers are weird in the game industry. They're kind of all over the place. Okay, running a booth. Let's talk about running a booth. Booth. A table or a space prominently featuring your game's branding and demo stations of your project or your studio's games. That's what a booth is. Booths help your visibility. If you go to a place where there's going to be thousands of people and your game is there, thousands of people might know about your game. If your game is on sale, you might see a bump from, oh, we were at MagFest this weekend and our game saw this bump because people, went back and bought it or something. Booths help you get feedback. If you are in the process of developing your game and you need feedback on your game, guess what? Go to an event, take a notebook, and just like have people play it, see where they get lost, see where they get confused, and you're going to get tons of data. It's awesome. What's it like running a booth? So what should you have? You should have 2 or 3 demo stations, meaning like 2 or 3, depending on what the game is, if you are able, 2 or 3 copies of your game playable. Now, what are the caveats to that? If it's a multiplayer game, then, and it's like a 4-player something, then you probably only need 1. Because then, like, 4 people can play, right? So you're taken care of by 1 copy. If you don't have 4 computers, that's fine. Lots of people don't own 4 computers. What you want to do in those cases is, like, if you and your teammates can be there, each bring a computer. And then each of your computers are a station. Avoid bringing multiple games if you're by yourself. So if you're by yourself, bring 1 game. I've tried to do 2 games at once by myself. It's really hard because you can't get into a flow, like explaining the game. Eventually you kind of get like your spiel down and you can do it on autopilot, which is really good because you'll have to be there for like 8 hours. But, you don't really get to do that when you're trying to split your attention. And then what else happens is that you're not serving people that come up to your booth. If you're like going through long explanations of one game, the other game might get ignored for a little bit and you're not helping the people that sit down for that other game or something like that. So unless you have, like, if you have 2 games, have 2 people and be like, you cover this game, I'll cover that game. But, do not run multiple games by yourself. And when I say multiple games, I literally mean 2 different titles. If it's 2 stations of 1 game, fine. You can do that by yourself because it's 1 game. I mean 2 different, like, distinct titles. Another thing you want to do, again, if you are able, so having a laptop out is fine. And again, that can be like if you are earlier on. What you ideally want to build up to is have the controller set up facing outward for the player. So like I have a laptop, right? And I have a gaming laptop. It's good enough to run stuff. If I took this to a show, what I would do is I would have my laptop facing me. I would have an external monitor that I would have facing the player. And then I would have my USB mouse, and I'd have a USB keyboard facing the player. So they would play that. To them, it looks really clean. And to me, so like, laptop looks less polished, I guess. But, it looks really clean to them. The other benefit is because we both have the screens and the screens would be duplicated, I can watch them play without having to look over their shoulder. That's really important because you don't want to bug your players. Like, the best way to get playtests is to not bug your players. And if I'm not like standing over them, that's even better. So I can observe their play and like take notes without them feeling self-conscious about it. If you have multiplayer, so if you are doing like some sort of like indie smash 'em up kind of game, like you're gonna make the next Towerfall or something, the next Samurai Gun. What you want to do is get a big TV or a screen and a projector. And because the idea is that your multiplayer game should, you're going to win if you can draw a crowd. And if you have a big TV that people could watch from far away and watch the people that are playing compete at your game, that's going to draw a crowd, that's going to build hype, that's going to, do your work for you. So somebody could get the most out of your game at the festival without even playing. They could just be like, oh man, look at this game, I gotta go download it. Now, this calls into question the idea of schlepping all this stuff to the site. This is why gaming laptops are great. You can put it in a bag, get on an airplane, go. Desktop, sure, be able to ship your desktop, careful with that. TVs, what are you going to do about a giant TV? So here's what I want you to do next time. When in the future we are able to have these events again and you go to a thing with an indie area, and if there are any indie games with a TV, I want you to look at the TV. And you should see, think about how many... Think about how many TVs are going to have, look at how many TVs have that yellow energy guide sticker on it when you are going through the indie area of a game festival or convention, or any other kind of sticker on it on the screen. Here's what happened. Here's what happens, and here's what indies do. And this is galaxy brain, and you should also do it if this is ever you. So if an indie developer has a big TV at their space, and they have stuff on it, what they have done is they have gone to the local Best Buy, they have bought a TV, they have kept all the packaging, they have kept all the stickers on it, they have kept all the materials on it, and the screen protector and everything. So that when they are done at the festival, they're going to package the TV back up, take it back to the Best Buy, and return it and get their money back. And so, that's how people will handle big hardware like that, because most places won't always provide hardware. That's it's a really big ask. It's tough. So, that's, if you want to have something like that be part of your setup, that's how people usually do it. Another thing you want to do is have a trailer ready, meaning that if somebody walks away from your game and nobody sits down for a few minutes, so if your game goes back to its title screens tend to be very static even if there is something moving on it. So think of the title screen for Hades, right? Hades logo... I think its logo has a little bit of animation on it, and then there's like some animation on Zagreus himself, right? That's not a lot. It's very static compared to like what that game is. So what you should do is either have like a media like have the trailer loaded on a media player so that somebody walks away, you click, and then the media player opens, and then you're ready to go. Or the game, after like X amount of time not being interacted with, defaults to a demo mode where it just plays your trailer for you. The point is, motion on the screen is better than no motion on the screen. If it's a title screen, even if your game is amazing, even if your game is Hades, no motion on a title screen is going to not draw players. Like that's gonna, your static title screen will not draw players. It's motion that will draw players. If you're doing tabletop, 1 or 2 copies of your game, or as many as you are able to like physically manage. Set the game board between each game. Never have your players at a demo set up the game. You set up the game. Even though you have directions in your box to set up the game, like some games, the first time you set it up takes forever to set up, and that's tons of wasted time that's not fun. So get them to the fun by setting it up for them between each play session. So when a play session ends, set it up again. And then consider choreographing each game. So when I was demoing La Mancha a lot, I would take 8 specific cards, put them on the top of the deck in a specific order, and what that did was it showed off it hit all the characters people knew from the novel Don Quixote. So it's like you get windmills, you get Dulcinea, you get all the things that people expect if they know anything about Don Quixote. So that hit all the points that people knew about. It showed off all the features of the game, and it was balanced. What you don't want is to have, like, if it's a card game, do the random shuffle, and then you get a bad shuffle where you don't see a feature for half the game. Or, all right, we're going to play this new game. Here we go. Draw first card. It's the level 20 kill you instant monster that you need to be level 20 to beat. Oh no. Now we've all died and now we're not having fun. You want to get to the fun, and you kind of want to stack the deck in the player's favor. If it's not a deck, maybe you set up a scenario like you move places into points on the board so they say, oh, hey, you're Austria-Hungary and you've just invaded Germany and here's what's about to happen. You basically set the player up in a situation where they can have fun right away instead of like going through the first awkward few turns. Running a booth, other stuff you want to have. You want to have a banner of some kind, usually about 2 feet by 4 feet, vertical or horizontal. If it's vertical, get a banner stand. So you can see in this image, like all these vertical banners, they let you see the game really well. Yeah, it's like magic when your friend introduces the game without telling you how to play. Exactly. So think of all the bad first encounters you've had with games. It's your job to not do that. You have to like cheat in the player's favor. So that's like hyper important when you're showing off a game. Stand for said banner. Always check with the event or venue if they're going to have tables. Never assume. Always check. They usually do, but just always check. Ask if there's going to be a tablecloth. Never assume. If there is not going to be a tablecloth, go to a party store, get a cheapo plastic tablecloth. Just make sure it's not like a gross, janky wooden table. Because, if it's a wooden table provided by a conference venue, those tables have seen some action. So they're like kind of rickety. So, dress them up. Put a nice, plastic tablecloth on them. Chairs on either side. Hopefully they give you 4 chairs. If they only give you 2, disabilities notwithstanding, give the chairs to the players. You should probably maybe have a few like camp chairs among your personal items so that you can, be able to sit down. So, but yeah, make sure you have enough chairs, at least for the players. If they're comfortable, they're going to like your game better. Some people will take their table, like most people will do just like this setup where there's like a table in between you and the players. Some people will do this thing where they'll take that table and like turn it to the side, and then like, if you're at a conference that has one of those like backs, like the partition back, they'll like put a rug down and then put bean bags out or something and create more like a living room out of their booth. Some people do that. So, maybe you do get alternate seating. I don't know. Do you get a rug? If you're doing that thing I just talked about, maybe you get a rug and it makes your booth floor feel better if you're making a living room setup. Or maybe you have a rug in front of the booth. I know MagFest particularly requires that for their indie space because they want their indie space to feel bright and welcoming in this otherwise super industrial conference hall that is like concrete. So, some people do, like get like a cheap rug. Maybe you get miscellaneous items based on your game's theme. So here, like in the foreground, look at Jared Huntley's game Art Club Challenge. Cleveland's own Jared Huntley. His game, which is a Zen game about doing art, has books that inspired the art. It has paint jars of like the colors that are featured in the game. It has his computer monitor framed by in a matted frame. So like, the matted frame goes around the PC screen that the game is displayed on. And, the signs for his games are put on canvas. So he went the extra mile to like kind of contextualize his game. Like, here's all these art supplies for this art game. It's a really, it just makes your booth really nice if you can do something like that. Like, if we go back to doing stuff like this, if I'm going to show off like kudzu or something, I might get like a potted plant. Nemo, I don't know. Maybe I'll get some like cotton to be clouds or something. I'm not going to get a bed. That would be a lot. Not turn of the century bed, but I don't know. We'll figure something out for Nemo that'll make it look awesome. And then the very least, you want to have like postcards or business cards of your studio or game. Those are really important because then they actually there's something that somebody can take away from your booth so that they are able to like, hey, what was that cool game I saw? Like when they're sitting down at Steam up in their hotel room or like 2 days afterward, they're like, what was that cool game I saw? Oh yeah, it was blah, blah, blah. Merchandising, bare minimum, make stickers and buttons. And Sticker Mule is a great website. There are also other cheaper alternatives to Sticker Mule for stickers and buttons. So, go hunt those down. But make stickers, make buttons. People love stickers and buttons. They will put the stickers on their water bottle or their laptop. They will put the buttons on their bag straps that they are carrying with them to the convention. And they will help remind you of them of your game. Always on those items, put your game's website because then it's like advertising. Otherwise like they'll remember the game and they don't remember the name, or they won't remember the website. So always put the website somewhere on it. It doesn't have to be big. It could be like little tiny text along the border, but it has to exist. Plushies are expensive, but if you have enough production money, hey, go find a company and get a quote. Maybe you get 3D printed items. This is a little more common. So you go to a website like Happy Worker, or a lot of people have 3D printers now. So maybe you get some free 3D printed keychains or something. I realize we're over time, almost done. Maybe you make some shirts. Shirts are expensive, but again, if your Kickstarter made it, maybe make some shirts. Soundtracks. Anybody still got a CD burner? Maybe make some soundtracks. Or again, your Kickstarter made it, do a run of vinyl. Or your actual game. Cards with Steam codes, USB with extras, or, again, if you got that hookup with Limited Run, one, introduce me to, maybe use that. Again, all of this is based on, does the venue actually allow you to sell anything? How this usually goes down is you find a manufacturer, you look at what their minimum order is, and then you get a quote. Quotes usually don't cost anything, and then, you see if you can pull it off. And then you see, maybe they do it on demand. Usually it's you got to get a minimum order, and then you pay that in one big lump sum. It can be expensive, but I wanted you to know that it exists for down the line. And then again, if you're going to events, confirm that the convention or venue allows you to sell at booths. Sometimes they do not for various state legal reasons. Double check. Oh, and if you're going to do that, also learn what the states where you are sales tax laws are. Something to think about. If you have to apply to do sales in that state or something like that. Online markets. Free ones include Itch, GameJolt, IndieDB, Humble Bundle. It costs money to be on. Epic, Google, App Store, Steam and then there's GOG. That's approval, and some of those have weird approval processes. Most require info what you'd find from a press kit. So again, that's why I have you do press kits and itch pages. Some require a lot more, Steam, all the different variations of your logo for different, achievements and things like that. But, having your thing on a market provides project legitimacy. Social media. So things you want to do: have a studio logo, have business cards, have social media accounts. Make sure that your social media accounts are professional social media accounts. It's not just a carryover from college. If it's you have pictures of yourself partying or something, be careful with that. With your studio, have a reason for being that's not just I'm making the games I like. You want to have something more than that. Our games are inspired by our games challenge the line between games and the arts, or we make games that express, I don't know, what it's like to be such and such, something. Marketplaces with audience feedback include Itch, GameJolt, and Steam. Be careful of the feedback on Steam. Steam is an interesting place. One time when I was doing a Steam Greenlight, rest in peace, but not, because Steam Greenlight sucked. It was like having a Kickstarter, but you didn't have that end date to know when your suffering was over. But one time I had somebody reach out on Steam Greenlight, hey, we'd love you to come talk about your game to our community. And I was like, oh, great. So let me check out this community. And I clicked on this community's page, and there's a swastika right there. And I was like, and never looking at this again. I like to buy games on Steam. That's about it. Social media plan, or also release stuff on Steam. But I don't like interacting on Steam. Social media plan. If you plan out your social media, it's going to take up less of your time, and it won't seem like a chore. Set a day to post certain content. Maybe even prepare that content early, and then just there's a feature on Twitter where you can schedule tweets and stuff. It's great. And then, use hashtags like Screenshot Saturday, Indie Dev, Game Dev, whatever, to improve your outreach. When audiences ask you questions, they're not trying to do gotchas most of the time. They literally are just asking questions. So be communicative. Don't promise anything ahead of time, but answer questions as best you can. I have had people in the past try to get free review codes from me by pretending to be Games Press. Be aware of the email you get it from, and if it does look sketchy, reach out to the site that they say they're from and be like, is this one of your people? Don't delete negative feedback on websites. If you see it, like if it's somebody being a troll, that only like trolls will watch and then will use that as a means to get angrier. So don't delete negative comments even if they are out of line, because then that will make them worse. And then, just step away sometimes. That's step away. It's not a bad thing. Do self-care. Okay, so we're pretty over time. Thank you for doing this. Are there any questions? I'm not going to do I covered a lot here, but are there any questions? I'll hang back here for a second for the questions. Okay. If there are not questions, or there will be questions later, I can, I'm happy to answer. Because, again, I threw a bunch of real talky bit. Are we going to be presenting our Game Maker games? That is happening during the final exam period. So, yeah. If there are any questions about any of this material, I will be in the class Discord. So, I will talk to you later. But, yeah, again, remember, that'll be final exam period. So look on your syllabus or on the registrar's website to see where that is. And I will talk to you later. Bye.